In 399 BC, an old man in Athens stood before a jury of 500 citizens, accused of corrupting the young and dishonoring the gods. He could have begged. Instead, he told them that a life without self-examination was not worth living for a human being. They voted to kill him, and he drank the poison willingly. That man was Socrates, and the strange thing is that he never wrote a book, never founded a school with walls, never claimed to teach anything at all. What he did was ask questions, relentless, uncomfortable questions that dismantled the confident certainties of everyone around him. And the reason we still remember him is that those questions were aimed at something you carry right now, the quiet suspicion that you have been living on autopilot, accepting beliefs you never actually tested. In this video we will examine 3 questions Socrates asked that no honest person can dodge, and why answering them changes how you live. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe. Every video here is built around an idea worth your time. His method had a name, elenchus, cross-examination, and it worked by exposing the contradictions people didn't know they were carrying. The first question sounds almost childish until you try to answer it. What do you actually mean? Socrates spent his days in the Athenian marketplace asking men who claimed to know what justice was, or courage, or piety, to simply define the word they used with such confidence. In Plato's dialogue Euthyphro, he corners a man on his way to prosecute his own father for murder, a man supremely certain he understands holiness, and by asking only for a clear definition, he reduces that certainty to rubble. The point was never to humiliate, though it often felt that way to the person being questioned. What Socrates revealed is that we operate our entire lives on words we cannot define. You say you want freedom, or success, or love, and you organize decades around those words without ever stopping to ask what they concretely mean to you. This is why the question is so disarming. It exposes the gap between the fluency of our speech and the emptiness behind it. I think this is the part most people underestimate. We assume clarity because we can talk. But raising this question forces a harder one. If you cannot define what you're chasing, how would you ever know when you've caught it? Here is where the popular image of Socrates falls apart. Most people picture him as the clever skeptic who tore down everyone's beliefs to prove his own superiority, the ancient equivalent of the man who wins every argument. That reading gets him exactly backwards. In Plato's Apology, Socrates recounts that the oracle at Delphi declared no one wiser than him, and this genuinely confused him, because he was certain he knew nothing of importance. His conclusion, after questioning every supposed expert in the city, was that he was wiser only in one narrow sense: he alone did not pretend to know what he did not know. The famous line, often rendered as "I know that I know nothing," was not false modesty and it was not defeat. It was the foundation of everything. Because a mind that believes it already understands cannot learn, and a mind that has admitted its ignorance is finally free to inquire. Honestly, this is the part that convinces me the tradition got the man right. He wasn't collecting victories. He was clearing ground. And yet this humility of his led to something far more demanding than mere doubt, a second question that turns the examination inward. The second question is the one Socrates aimed at himself as much as anyone: is what I believe actually true, or merely convenient? This is the question that arrives at 3 a.m., when the distractions run out and the thoughts you've been outrunning finally catch you. Consider the man who has told himself for years that he stays in a joyless job for the sake of his family, or the woman who insists she doesn't want the thing she quietly wants every single day. Socrates would not have accepted either statement at face value. In the Gorgias he argues that it is better to suffer injustice than to commit it, a claim almost everyone rejects instinctively, and he does it precisely to show that our first, comfortable beliefs are often the least examined. Because the beliefs that protect us from discomfort are exactly the ones we defend without checking. This is the harder half of the examined life. It is easy to question a stranger's definition of justice. It is far more painful to ask whether the story you tell about your own life would survive a single honest cross-examination. But even a truthful belief is not yet a life, which brings us to the question Socrates thought mattered most of all. The third question is the one that gives the others their weight: how, then, should a person live? In the Gorgias, Socrates calls this the finest thing a man can inquire into, and the worst thing to neglect, no small matter, he says, but how we ought to live. Notice the shape of it. Not what do you want, which is the question the modern world trains you to answer, but how ought a human being to live, which asks whether your wants are even worth pursuing. Most people never confront this directly. They inherit a template, a career path, a set of milestones, a definition of a good life absorbed from parents and peers and advertisements, and they mistake following that template for having chosen it. Socrates was executed rather than abandon this question, and I don't think that was stubbornness. He genuinely believed that a life you never chose on purpose is barely your life at all. The gap between who you are and who you meant to become is not a moral failure. It is simply what happens when this third question goes unasked for too long. Which means the practice that follows is not abstract philosophy, it is the most concrete thing you can do tonight. There is a temptation, once you hear these three questions, to treat them as a quiz you pass once and put away. That would be to miss what Socrates was doing entirely. The elenchus, his method of cross-examination, was never a means to a final answer, it was a way of living in permanent, productive uncertainty. This is why he could say in the Apology that the unexamined life is not worth living and mean it as a daily instruction, not a one-time realization. I assumed for a long time that the goal was to arrive at correct definitions and settle the matter. I was wrong. The value was never in the conclusion, it was in the willingness to keep asking after you thought you were finished. Because certainty is where inquiry goes to die, and the moment you stop questioning your definitions, your convenient beliefs, and your chosen way of life, you begin quietly drifting again. What this reveals is something almost paradoxical: the examined life is not a destination you reach but a habit of return. And a habit, unlike an insight, can actually be practiced, which is exactly what Socrates would demand of you before you closed this and moved on with your evening. So here is the practice, distilled to 3 steps you can begin tonight. First, take one word you organize your life around: success, freedom, love, and write down what you actually mean by it. If you cannot, you have found your work. Second, take one belief that keeps you comfortable and ask whether it would survive an honest cross-examination. Third, ask the largest question quietly: is the life I'm living one I chose, or one I inherited? Socrates gave up his life rather than stop asking these things, and his real lesson is not the answers but the refusal to stop questioning. The unexamined life isn't worth living, not as a threat, but as the plainest description of what it costs to drift. Philosophy is not an academic exercise. It is the art of living well. Subscribe if you want to keep at it. And if you want something concrete to take with you, there is a free Stoic starter kit in the description, 20 timeless quotes, a 7-day routine, and a printable journal. Any books mentioned today are also linked below.